And we will call the meeting to order. Our March 14th, 2023 Principals Advisory Council meeting. And so we will begin with our item 1 with Commissioner Glass, if he is in the group just yet. And I'm going to ask Allison and Keith if you could double check that for me. And it's perfectly okay. We can go ahead and go to item 2, and I'm going to ask Suzanne Farmer, our PrAC chairperson, to take over at this time.
Hold on. I see Dr. Glass. I don't see his face, but I see that he's in the meeting.
I'm here, and my face is here too.
Yay!
All right, great. Let me stop sharing. We'll let him start our meeting for us with the welcome.
Hi, welcome. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see all of you. We really look forward to these advisory meetings and hearing from all the different stakeholder groups that we have. We have a number of advisories at KDE, including this principal group, but also a student group, a teacher group, a local school board members group, and a superintendent group. And then we have this other larger group that kind of mixes them all together called the United We Learn Council. So we get lots of advice at KDE, and we are grateful for that. We love hearing from people who are doing the work. I thought I might just give you an update on some things happening in the legislative session. They're on quite a tear this week. We really started this legislative session with high hopes that we would see some challenges that we're experiencing in our schools in Kentucky be addressed by the legislature, chiefly the challenges with the teaching profession. And I'm sure many of you, excuse me, are experiencing higher than usual turnover, and then that creates more openings, and we are not seeing a commensurate increase in the number of applicants and people entering the teaching profession. So the result of that is that as a building principal, you're seeing fewer options because it's just what the data is telling us is that we've increased the number of openings by a couple of thousand over where it typically is, but the number of people entering the profession has not increased. And we're seeing a shift toward away from traditionally certified candidates, more toward option 6 or other alternatively certified folks. So that's what you're experiencing. We've been worried about this sort of wave and a drop in the number of available teachers for some time, and it does seem to be coming to pass. Our turnover rate is over 20% now in Kentucky, and that compares to typically you'll see turnover on an average year nationally 15 to 16%. So that 4 or 5% increase when you multiply it across all of the teachers in the state of Kentucky, it turns into a couple of thousand more openings. We're seeing districts and schools solve that by relying on less experienced teachers, by pulling in retirees. So that's great, but both of those groups are also more likely to leave. So that exacerbates the turnover challenge that we have. By relying on those. And we've seen a 200% increase in the number of emergency certified teachers. So that, if anything, if we need a bright red warning light that says we have a problem, that's it. Because what it means is that we're relying on people with a lesser sort of background, training, expertise, that we're putting them into teaching roles in the state at a much higher rate than we have been in the past. We're grateful for everybody who's willing to serve in a teaching role, and I know you may have have emergency certified folks in your building who are filling a need and doing a great job. But make no mistake, it's on at the macro level, we're putting people with lesser qualifications into the teaching profession than we ever have in the past. So that's what excuse me, that's what the challenges look like in terms of the teaching profession. So we really were hopeful this summer that we'd see the legislature take some action around that. We did get a bill introduced by Representative Tipton that we're appreciative of, but I think even Representative Tipton has said that it doesn't go far enough and do enough to really meet the magnitude of the problem. And the bill that he introduced even got watered down further, and it doesn't really contain any funding to have much of an impact. So I'm not optimistic, even if that passes, that we're going to see that. So when it comes to the teaching profession, I guess the message that I have to give you is help is probably not on the way, and you're going to have to keep doing what you can do to hang on to the people that you have, and find ways to get really creative about recruiting people and aggressive about that, because it's going to be on you as building principals and as on your education systems that you work in to try and solve this. So wish I had better news, but I just want to be straight with you on that. Other challenges that we are having relate to attendance. So you're probably experiencing that too. We have seen lesser attendance than in previous years. Typically, we're over 95, 96, 97% in most schools and districts. We're seeing 93, 92%. And so those, again, just a few percentage point shifts when you talk about a macro level state budget, or even the budget at multi-million-dollar district budgets. Now you get into some real money in a hurry when you start making those shifts. So we really had hoped that the General Assembly would do something to stabilize that ADA funding because of COVID and RSV and flu that we've all been going through. And then there does seem to be a challenge just coming back from COVID with a focus on attendance with students and families. So all of that stuff we're feeling, and with Kentucky's funding system being based on in-person attendance, that presents a funding challenge. So we did get some language initially introduced that would have smoothed that out. It quickly got pulled back away, and we have not seen it introduced again. We're in the last few days of the session here, so I'm not hopeful that we're going to get that. So in addition to the teaching challenges that you have, we may also see districts having to make some really difficult choices when it comes to pay or staffing levels or supports. So it's bizarre, but at a time when Kentucky's economy has never been hotter and state revenues have never been higher, you may end up feeling the loss of some positions and services in schools because of this. So again, wish I had better news, but that doesn't seem to be a priority. The things that clearly are priorities right now are culture war issues. I would characterize them. So there's a lot of attention around transgender youth and how or not how to support them, issues around drag queen shows and all sorts of stuff like this is taking up a lot of time. And some of that's coming over into our world with education. The legislature has been really critical of the department's guidance around supporting LGBTQ, particularly transgender young people. I would just emphasize that what we've provided is guidance. So schools and districts can ignore it or follow it. But what we've tried to say is that these young people exist in our schools. We know that they're at greater risk of suicide and self-harm and harm from others, and they require some different supports. And so we've looked through the evidence around that and provided some ideas on how schools could better support those kids, because I believe, and the Kentucky Department of Education believes, that public schools should be safe places for every child, and every child should be welcomed. And we have to go take some steps above and beyond to do that with some of our kids. So we don't shy away from or back down from the guidance and supports that we've provided, but that's become a political lightning rod, and we are seeing some legislation introduced around that, or has been introduced and discussed. So I don't know exactly how that's going to end up yet. There are several versions of these bills out there. Some of them are really more aggressive than others. So we'll see what ultimate versions come out. There were several of them introduced in the House. The one that came out of the Senate was Senate Bill 150. And we'll have to see how that turns out. Other sort of political issues going on with the legislature. You may have seen today, or those of you working in Jefferson County, there was an effort to sort of have Jefferson County undergo an audit that would be conducted by the state auditor, with one of the stated purposes being sort of, dividing the district up, and restructuring it. So it's unusual that you have an audit conducted that has sort of a predefined outcome that it's seeking at the beginning of it. But this was a surprise. It did not get out of committee. It doesn't mean that it won't come back in some form. And we've seen Jefferson County being a particular focus area for this legislature in the past. Other changes on the politics front. There has been a bill introduced in the Senate. It's out of the Senate now and is out of the House committee, so it's likely to pass as well. That would change the structure at the Kentucky Department of Education, mostly relating to my role. In Kentucky, since CARA, the position of commissioner has been an independent role, independent of the governor, independent of the legislature, and designed to sort of be a professional who makes decisions based on the best interest of the education system and the students and the people working in our schools. This effort would make the commissioner subject to Senate confirmation, which the stated purpose behind that is to remove the politics from my role. In reality, it will make future commissioners sort of pander to the legislative majority. So that's what's going to happen in the long term. It's written now that the confirmation would occur on appointment or reappointment. So my contract runs through September of 24. And then if I were reappointed after that, I'd have to undergo confirmation. So we'll see what happens after that. But that's a significant governance shift in Kentucky. That bill also included initially a revision of how the state board was selected. That element was taken out, and I think that was probably the right thing to do, because it would have created this sort of appointing committee that would have been a really cumbersome process to determine state board members, and that's been removed. So that was a positive step. Some good things that I think we're seeing. There is a reading research center that Senator West has introduced. We're really supportive of that. I think it's a good idea. Will allow us to have about $3 million to start a reading research center, and then we run an RFP process to have different providers from around the state and around the country potentially come in and provide that reading research center for Kentucky. So I think that's a good thing. We're very supportive of that. It goes along with the work that Senator West and Representative Tipton have done around reading over the past few sessions that have been really good. There, as I mentioned before, Representative Tipton did introduce and at least got some movement on a bill to support the teaching profession. So we'll see if anything comes out of that has any impact. One other, I guess, policy matter that you may have heard or read some about, there's a teacher misconduct bill, largely following on after the series that the Lexington Herald Leader put together around why teachers lose their licenses in Kentucky. A lot of them lose their license after sexual misconduct with students. And so Representative Tipton also has a bill that's moving around that would require applicants to disclose any past allegations or investigations that they've had. It would require school districts to ask questions of previous employers if any of that existed, and it would require the KDE to develop a training process that we would connect to licensure around sort of not getting in these situations in the first place. So all of those things are in as a concept, we think this is a good bill, and it makes some steps that are in the right direction, in my professional opinion, around ensuring that we have quality people who aren't taking advantage of students in teaching roles. There are some troubling aspects to it. This, going back for all points in the past and asking for prior allegations, even if they've been were proven not true, it is troubling. And then how far back do we go if you get somebody that you get 30 years back and they worked in multiple districts. That's going to be a lot of effort on our HR systems to manage that. But in concept, I think the bill is doing some good things and some necessary things. All right, shifting gears, we'll try to end my part on a more uplifting note. We do continue our work around the United We Learn effort. We did get some feedback from our educators around the state around United We Learn, and what we found is that superintendents know quite a bit about it, principals know some, and teachers don't know very much. So we've got some work to do in making people aware of the direction of United We Learn. So I'll take every opportunity I can just to restate what it's about and ask you to evangelize this to the extent that you can. United We Learn has three main parts, and it's based on what Kentuckians told us they wanted for the future of our schools. The first of those is they told us they wanted better, more meaningful, more vibrant, more relevant learning experiences for students, and experiences that prepared our kids for the fast-moving world that's already here, that's only getting faster. So that's fun work. That's exciting work. That's the most important work, if you ask me. So we have a number of efforts underway at KDE with the PBL Works efforts that are happening across the state and the deeper learning collaboratives and that the co-ops are running with almost all the school districts in the state. So hopefully that's happening in your school in some form. And what I'm most excited about with this focus on student experience is it doesn't require anything different to bring it about. All you need is a willingness for people to approach teaching and learning differently. And you don't need anybody's permission. You don't need a legislative act. You don't need a big budget line to do it. We just need to think about the time and what we're having our students do in a different way. And so I'm excited about that. The second major part of United We Learn is around assessment and accountability. And Kentuckians told us that our systems of tests and measures and the way we rate schools was a barrier to the kind of deeper learning that they wanted to see brought about. And they asked us to experiment with, pilot, and innovate around different forms of assessment and different ways that we evaluate our schools. So that work is underway right now. We have what we call our L3 districts, our local laboratories of learning, districts all across Kentucky that are piloting parts of this. If you're a district that's involved in that, thank you, thank you, thank you. We do everything we can to highlight and lift up the great work that's happening in those places and think about how, if we can come up with some different approaches to assessment and accountability, how we can bring that to scale across the state. So that's exciting work. And then the last part is around really connecting with our communities in some more authentic ways. We're trying to model that at KDE with our United We Learn Council. So that group is intentionally really diverse and lots of different experiences and backgrounds that we have. It's about 80 Kentuckians that are part of that. And we intentionally added to it people from regions that we felt were historically underrepresented, from perspectives that we thought were underrepresented, to make sure that we're hearing from them. And we're trying to model this value that we call reciprocity at KDE. And what that means is that the department has certain real power, but there's also real power that comes from people in communities. And so can we share some of our power with them and they share some of their power with us, and we work together to do something good for kids and families. All right, I think that's probably enough of an update for me. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions or feedback anybody has, or any advice or direction that you have for me. Stacy, I'll turn things back to you and see if there's any feedback people have.
Suzanne, anything?
I think we're okay. I appreciate you standing up for the rights of our students. And I know that I have had teachers that are concerned about their rights as well, and what this might mean legislatively or for their rights as teachers. And I don't know if that's ever been a part of this conversation, or what we can do to make our staff feel as protected as well, and not just our students. I know that, I mean, of course the students are important, but also our staff are feeling attacked by the culture wars.
Yeah, it is distressing. Suzanne, one other element that I should have talked about that relates, I think, directly to principals, and it sort of touches on the culture war aspect. It's the curriculum approval bill, so Senate Bill 5. You may recall last year there was this sort of Teaching American Principles Act. It listed out a bunch of concepts that had to be taught to students over the course of their educational career. It was a way that the legislature was trying to get at this fears around critical race theory. If that was happening in schools. So one of the things they did with that bill was they moved approval of curricular decisions to superintendents. So they took it away from the SBDMs. Well, here we are a year later, and now I think what this is saying is, okay, the superintendent is approving the curriculum, but if there's a challenge to that curriculum, then here's the process for setting that. And most districts have a curriculum challenge process policy already. At least, there's a model policy in KSBA. Every district that I've ever worked in had a model policy for curriculum challenges. So, but how this one works is that the parent challenges the curriculum. Then the school principal is actually the one that makes the initial determination on that curriculum challenge. That can then be appealed to the Board of Education locally. So it bypasses the superintendent in this case. And then the board weighs in. And then if the board still says, no, this curricular material is still of value and we leave it in, the parent can still request that their student not, opt out of that curricular experience or that resource. So I think that's probably going to move or is going to pass. But it's going to put you as principals in a really central role in making that first determination around curriculum resources and materials. So I think you'll have to work with your local superintendents on how are curricular decisions made. You'll have to talk with your teachers about the resources that they're offering. And then if somebody raises a challenge, you'll need some process within that. And I would be looking to your districts for some support on this. How do you make this decision? What qualifies as something sort of obscene or sexualized? I think that's the focus of the legislation. Does a curricular material or resource do that? Does it have some merit and cultural or scientific or academic relevance or importance? So these are all things you have to weigh through. And the sponsor of the bill has talked about that they want sort of the values of the community to drive this decision. So that's another consideration. I mean, ultimately, in determining the values of the community, again, from an operational standpoint, it's the principal that is going to be making the first call. So you'll need some way to figure out what are the values in your community, and you probably need some help from your district on that. So interesting, another wrinkle to this, Suzanne, that I think is going to have an impact on all of you. But if it passes, which I think it will, then at the department we'll put together more guidance on here's how we think this could work, or some things for you to think about.
Thank you for that. I think, and I apologize if I get is it Senate bill or House Bill 150? I can't remember which one that was.
Senate Bill 150 is the transgender pronoun bill.
At one time that had, I don't know if it still does, but it had some amendments that were, I thought, especially similar to this idea that you just brought up with Senate Bill 5, where it was like, if you think that you're having this person be your child's teacher goes against your fundamental beliefs, then you can request like a different. It felt like it was opening up a whole can of worms about things around fundamental beliefs that were even bigger. Not to say that I already have issues with the bill as it stood, but then they opened up a whole bunch more of like anything that is against your fundamental beliefs, like you shouldn't be asked to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really empowers the teacher to make the decision. So the teacher gets to decide, what pronoun that they want to use in calling a child. And some of this, again, is in reaction to KDE's guidance on this, where we've suggested if a student, or, whatever pronoun the student requests, you should call them that. And again, it's based on placing the safety and welfare of the child as the first priority. So in this case, now the teacher makes that decision. And so, you may have a teacher that misgenders a child, and we know that increases the risk of self-harm, suicide, or harm from others for that child. So that's the troubling aspect of it. Now, the number of transgender students that we have in the state is not very high, but this I think will make things more safe for less safe for the ones that we do have. So it is. We've been opposed to it clearly, but it is moving, and is, I think, part of the cultural focus that is with the legislature right now, and is really part of a larger cultural focus, I think, with national politics right now.
Are there any other questions or comments for Dr. Glass?
I just wanted to comment to the principals about, I did put it in the chat, but where we talk about the challenging of curriculum. As principals, it's our job to be proactive, not reactive. So the model curriculum framework resources that are put out by KDE and the teaching and learning department is huge in bringing the community in and having community representation and parent representation as you are choosing high quality instructional resources. So if you haven't tapped into that resource, I would urge you to do that, because our goal is to just not get to that point, right, where it is challenged to that extent. So sorry, I just kind of had to throw that out there.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. That's a great resource, and it's a good touchstone for curricular decisions for the state. It's the model curriculum framework. I think helps lead us to good choices when it comes to curriculum, thinking about the quality aspects, the research-based foundational aspects, and the inclusion of community voices into the decision making. So thank you for posting that. Okay, well, not hearing any more feedback or comments, I just want to close by saying thank you. It's been another challenging year. This is a challenging period that we're in right now, but just know you're appreciated. I appreciate all of you deeply. I know your teachers and your students and your communities appreciate you deeply. You often, when you're a principal, you hear a lot and you deal with a lot of problems. If it weren't a problem, somebody else would have solved it before it got to you. So I know your jobs are tough, and it's juggling chainsaws and alligators a lot of the time. But just know that we really value and appreciate all of you. Keep going. Your teachers and your kids really rely on you, and you're making a difference. So hang tough, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. All right, we'll go to item 2, and in the chat, we did have the Google form, the link for that to verify attendance. So go ahead and access that. But at this time, I'm going to allow or ask Suzanne. Can you see the slide, Suzanne, that has the members? And we'll just do our roll call.
I can, thank you. So when I call your name, if you'll just unmute and let me know that present or that you're here. Wayne Ackerman.
Here, thank you.
Erica Bowles. Nick Brooks. Ashley Bird.
Present. Thank you.
Thanks. Ann Cox.
Present.
Beth Davidson. Brian Ehrenberg.
I'm here, thanks.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm Brian. Kevin Garner.
Here.
Jared Hankins.
I'm here.
Tanya Jury.
Here.
Sarah Keiss.
Here.
Carla Collodi. Anne Marie Landry. Robert Lightning.
I'm here.
Travis Markham.
I'm here.
Katrina McDermott. Looks like Carla's here too. Looks like her mic wasn't working. Peggy Sinclair Morris. Amy Rhodes.
I'm here.
Oh, and Katrina's here too. Thank you, Amy. Gina Rose.
Here.
Matt Schaefer. Toya Roby. Sarah Woodford.
I'm here.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Our next item on our agenda is to approve our draft agenda for the meeting. So if there's someone who'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Thank you so much. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. So if you would take a moment to type approve if you approve the agenda into the chat box. All right, I've done something to my chat really quick. I don't know what's happened. Sorry. It's not letting me see both at the same time anymore, so I apologize for that. All right, thank you all for approving the agenda. We will need to do the same thing to approve the summary of our minutes. So is there a motion to approve our draft minutes from our meeting, our last meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll need to type in the chat to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
And just to verify, who provided the second?
Was that Robert?
It was Travis Markham.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And the agenda, who made the second on that one?
I think there were two of us that talked at the same time, but I did as
Okay.
well.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, Brian.
Yes, ma'am. No problem.
Got it. I'm just capturing the notes in the background here. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. So this next item on our agenda is to learn more about the KDE's teacher recruitment efforts with the Ed Rising State Conference and Competition. And to help us learn more about that is John Pace from the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. So I'm going to let John take over.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to speak. If I could get you to stop sharing real quick, we'll have a slideshow presentation as well, and you have, good. And Justin, you're here. Just want to make sure everything's lined up here. Great. Well, again, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak today and give you a brief wrap-up of the 2023 Educators Rising Kentucky State Conference and Competitions. Now, as many of you know, Educators Rising is the career and technical student organization that encourages and supports high school students interested in exploring and pursuing careers in the field of education. Now, operating under the umbrella of the Go Teach KY initiative, Educators Rising is inspiring students to consider the field of education as a viable career path. Now, through this effort, we are recruiting the next generation of Kentucky educators to help remedy the critical teacher shortage currently affecting every state in the country. Now, research shows that the most important factor contributing to student achievement is effective teachers, and it is the mission of the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness and the Division of Educator Recruitment and Development to ensure that all students across the Commonwealth have equitable access to effective educators. And it all starts with early recruitment and development. It really does. Last year, at the end of our first live conference since coming out of the COVID pandemic, I was given a challenge by our Associate Commissioner, Dr. Byron Darnell, and that was to double the size of our conference this year. And I'm pleased to report that we achieved that goal. Last year, we had a student attendance of around 280, and this year we had 576 students attend the conference. Not only that, but we tripled the size of students involved in competition events, having 343 competitors total. The competition events allow students to display skills learned in the classroom in areas such as lesson planning and development, public speaking, creating and curating artifacts used in the classroom, and developing job interview skills through resume and cover letter development and mock interviews. Students can also explore different careers in the field of education, such as teaching, administration, and support service careers through research and interviewing people currently employed in those areas. Now, a new competition that we offered this year was Children's Literature K-3 in Spanish. This competition has the student compose and present a children's book in Spanish, and then they do a quick debrief with the judges. And we had 12 entries in this category, and one of my judges remarked to me later that several of the competitors said that for the first time, they felt their voice was heard and they were welcomed as and encouraged as potential educators. Now, the conference also allows students to hear from leaders in the field. Excuse me. This year's opening keynote address was offered by Dr. Amber Sargent, Kentucky High School Teacher of the Year, who spoke to the students on the rewards of teaching despite the many challenges that teachers face today. She shared personal stories of the impact one teacher can have on a student and encouraged our aspiring educators to cherish those moments throughout their career. We also heard from Dr. Glass, whose presence is a must at our conference. He shared about the importance of the development of our education workforce, the United We Learn campaign, and the importance of creating deep and meaningful learning experiences for our students. Dr. Roger Cleveland from Eastern Kentucky University offered a presentation that focused on working effectively with diverse learners. Always highly interactive, Dr. Cleveland engaged our students in a series of exercises that demonstrated the importance of understanding different learners, their culture, and diverse learning styles. The conference also took the opportunity to raise student voice in our organization. I always tell my teacher leaders that if you're not developing leadership within your students and chapters, you're missing a significant opportunity to allow your students to develop those skills they will need in the classroom, such as problem solving, conflict resolution, interpersonal leadership, and other durable skills. Now, with that focus in mind this year, we introduced our inaugural state officer team, and they took the reins of this conference and did a great job. I have to brag on them a little bit. Our state president, Ms. Audrey Gilbert, led our leadership team in much of the planning and execution of this conference. They served as masters of ceremony, were ambassadors to Educators Rising students, engaged students in numerous activities, and facilitated several networking opportunities. We also had a collegiate panel of current education majors engaged in a panel discussion moderated by Dr. Elizabeth Dinkins, Dean of the School of Education at Bellarmine University. The topic was on the experience of majoring in education, the challenges that students face, and how to succeed as an education major. And the questions were composed by our state officer team, and the discussion was highly interactive and engaged students who participated. Finally, a high watermark of the day was unquestionably our keynote speakers. First was Ms. Hannah Edelin, Miss Kentucky 2022, whose presentation entitled Rise Up, It's Time to Be an Educator. She focused her talk on 4 aspects of teaching, but I was struck by her comments on the service aspects of teaching and how educators can be great servant leaders and how this connected to the United We Learn campaign as we work to collaborate with our communities. Finally, our Lieutenant Governor, Jacqueline Coleman offered closing thoughts for the conference and shared her experiences as a teacher and coach and offered words of encouragement to our students. She assured us that the Beshear Coleman administration is an education-first administration, and her presence at this conference cemented that commitment in the minds of all who heard her speak. Lieutenant Governor Coleman and Ms. Edelin also stayed for our award ceremony and personally congratulated each one of our contest winners. So as I was preparing this wrap-up, I was trying to think how I would conclude. Now, the old saying goes that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I brought 22. So you can see it was really a great day. This effort was truly a magnum opus for our little 5-person division, but by no means was this our effort alone. We have the support of many offices at KDE who send judges and ambassadors to help us execute this conference. We also had educators from around the Commonwealth who gave of their time and talents to help judge competitions, and we had a total of 118 judges in all. Our gracious hosts at Bellarmine University, of course, but most importantly, our teacher leaders who sponsor these chapters, doing the boots on the ground work, encouraging students to become teachers. And this is truly an all hands on deck effort. So in the coming months, we're going to honor our seniors who have committed to enroll in one of the Commonwealth's educator preparation programs with our Educators Rising National Signing Day. And many are going to travel to Orlando at the end of June, to compete at the national conference. And seeing all this activity, I'm reminded of what Dr. Dinkins said to our Assembly of Future Educators. When I look out at this gathering of students committing to education as a career, I see hope. So thank you for allowing me to share about this vital and exciting work that we're in the middle of.
Before you transition, John, I was just curious from the group that's with us, our PrAC members today. Any of your schools involved in this? Did you send students to the conference? Love to hear from you and get some insights about it.
Yeah, this is Jared. We sent a couple from Webster County, and we actually had one of our students that advanced to the national contest. She wants to be a high school English teacher, and so she did really well, and I think she is planning to go to the nationals. So we have a teacher that has really kind of enjoyed getting that started and working with them, that pathway of kids to try to build some future teachers. So we were glad to hear that ours did well and enjoyed it.
Terrific.
I know in our district, we just started our Ed Rising program. My wife was actually one of the judges that came down and helped out, but she's been instrumental in starting that program at the high school, even though she's an elementary certified teacher. So she's kind of investing in the future by doing this, and she was excited about it. She had a chance to meet Mr. Pace and your wife as well. She said she was a lovely person, so she was excited about it. But great to see all the educators, and I know that the program that we've started in Boyd County, I know we've got 3 or 4 that have been to our school to do mock lessons, and I know they do some other competitions outside. We're close to Marshall University, and they have a scores competition for high schoolers that are teaching lessons, and so they came in and recorded lessons to enter a contest for that as well. So I mean, it's kind of a branching out where we're kind of on the verge of Ohio, West Virginia. Here in the edge of Kentucky, but yeah, it's been a positive experience for the kids in our district as well.
Well, and I'm out in Moorhead, so if you ever need any extra help, I'm in Huntington quite often.
For sure.
Yeah. And anybody, I'm willing to go anywhere. And by the way, all of you principals who sent teachers to help judge and gave them a day and got them a sub, thank you very much. It's like I said, this is an all hands on deck effort.
And so as perhaps if any of the members here today, John, are sharing this information with other principals, what would be the guidance you give? Like, do they need to just reach out to you if they're interested in starting a chapter or getting more information?
Yeah, reach out to me. I'll also put in the chat, we have a guidance document for grow your own programs for getting started. And I'm always available. People call me up and they say, oh, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm like, no bother at all. That's what I'm here for. That's my job. Bother me. Call me, because we really need to be actively recruiting students into this profession, because we have a shrinking workforce. The shortages that we're experiencing in teaching, we're experiencing across the board in a lot of different industries. The largest work group currently are baby boomers, but they're all retiring, and I'm early Gen X. I'm not too far behind. And we have, since 2007, the CDC reported a 20% reduction in birth rates. So we have an aging society, and so we're fighting and scrapping for every person we can get into the field, and just like a lot of other industries too, nursing and other healthcare industries and manufacturing. So if we're not actively recruiting, we're already behind the 8 ball. But I'll pop that guidance document in the chat here if anybody would like to review it. And again, please feel free to reach out to me.
I dropped it in there for you, John.
Dude, the wizard. We refer to him as the wizard in our little division. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Or well, again, thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us. We had a request from one of our members to have an item on the agenda to talk about what we could do to improve culture and climate in our schools. And it feels timely because this is a hard time of the year every year for our teachers. And Stacy and I felt like it was worth having this conversation related to teacher recruitment efforts, because our teachers in our buildings are the best recruitment or deterrent tool that we might have to grow our profession. So if the teachers aren't happy, the students see that and they're not encouraging others to join the profession. And if they are, then they're encouraging people, even if they're not saying the words, by being happy at their jobs and showing a passion for their work. So we thought that this would be a good time to squeeze in that conversation. So we're going to be trying something a little different. We have a Jamboard. So I don't know, Stacy, if you need to, or who's.
I think we're popping the link in. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
It's there in the chat.
okay, great. So let me explain this Jamboard. The way that this is going to work is when you open the Jamboard, the first page of the Jamboard is actually named a contaminated space. And if you've had adaptive schools training, if you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's great training for principals. It's like cognitive coaching, but on how to coach and lead teams. So one of the tools or theories in adaptive schools is to like actively name and deal with these contaminated topics or subjects and then set them aside. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to work on the Jamboard together and think about all of the things that get in the way of teachers, that will impact teachers negatively in terms of their culture and their climate. And thinking about things that we can control here. There's a lot of things that we can't control. For example, the legislative conversation that we had earlier is something that's bigger than our sandbox, right? It's not something we can handle as a building principal. So if there's something that you feel like it's within our control that can impact teacher climate and culture, just grab a Post-it note or either a sticky note, or you can make a text box and just drag those tools are on the left of the Jamboard, and focus on what you can control. So if you pick up a sticky note, just go ahead and type in it and it will populate and we should all be able to see it. Are there any questions, or what questions might you have about this? Anything?
So how long will we take for just this opening part, Suzanne?
Just a couple minutes. So maybe 2 minutes. Thank you. So we'll just give it another maybe 30 seconds. And just this is an opportunity to think about the things that negatively impact. We're going to talk about the positives here in a minute. All right, we're getting ready to close this part of it. All right. I want you to, we're going to switch to our second slide, and I can see some trends in our first slide. We'll come back to that in a minute. But in our second slide, there are some buckets here, and there may be things that you think we've left out. Is there, and if you have a topic that you feel like doesn't fit well in one of these categories, we can make another category, or you could always drop it on the side. But are thinking about some things that would help improve climate and culture would often fit into some kind of celebrations, positive recognition, something along those lines. The way that we're communicating with our staff and they're able to communicate with us, and then also ways in which we're building a community. So if are there other, before we get started, are there other topics that you think are missing? All right, so if you want to go ahead and start dropping in your thoughts here about the ways that we can or have improved our culture and climate. Our hope is that we can learn from each other through this process. We're the ones that are doing this work, so All right, we're starting to run out of room. I don't think the ideas are slowing down, but we are starting to run out of room. I wanted to give people an opportunity if there's things that you wanted to share with your microphone, or if you had a question about something that somebody has dropped in here that you'd like to know more about, that we could also have a discussion. Feel free to keep typing away if that's where you're most comfortable.
So we're really excited at my school. My family resource has come up with this community event. We have a lot of grandparents and relatives raising children at my elementary school. And so she has invited various community leaders. So we have one of our family court judges, we have our sheriff, we have one of the local kind of behavioral therapy groups. I'm leaving off a few. A family lawyer who are going to come on a specific day. We're using a community bank that has a large meeting area because we felt like that was neutral territory. And we've invited all of the area schools. But the idea is just to empower our families who are raising these kids just to know more about what's available to them. If they have any questions, they can ask ask these people in kind of hopefully a non-judgmental area. But this is the first time we've ever done it. It's next month, and we're really excited. So far, we've had a lot of positive feedback we have a grandparent group that meets. And so they were kind of instrumental in us developing this, but we're really excited about that. And we feel like that's a good way to meet the needs of our family and invite the community in.
And it looks like there's a question. Do you do that individual or send it out to whoever wants to come?
I'll chime in. That was my question. What I was asking, I'm not sure how large your school is. Do you call individual families and invite them, or do you kind of just put it out as if you are a grandparent or a member, that's not a parent, come out? Like how do you invite parents without stepping on, or not parents, but other members of the family without stepping on toes? I love the idea, by the way.
Well, thank you. So my family resource is who kind of hosts this grandparent group that meets at our school once a month anyway. And so she has reached out to those members individually, but then we've shared this with, we're a school of 600, but there's 6 other elementary schools in my district. And then we have an independent district that's right next to us that has 4 elementary schools. So we've sent this out to all the family resource coordinators to share with their families, because you know as well as I do that we have people who are considered homeless because they're living with family members or they're living with friends. And so this is just kind of open to whomever feels the need or has a desire to ask a question. You're welcome to come. And my husband, he works at this bank, and so he's excited just to have kind of host. They're going to provide the refreshments. So I'll try to find the flyer and send it to you guys just in case you're interested in doing something similar. We put a QR code to where they could make a reservation just so we know how many to plan for. But I'll try to find that real quick.
Thank you. Are there any other members that would like to share out or ask questions about any of the items posted? Thanks, Anne, for sharing. So Allison has posted a question to challenge us to think about our students and to have them take ownership of telling our story. And I will say that that's something I've tried this year a little more. I'm at a primary, so preschool, kindergarten, first, and I went to a session at CASA this summer, and I don't remember the district off the top of my head, but there was a district that was doing, there may even be somebody from that district on this call, something about how to tell your story. And it was basically like, what's your brand? And it was marketed heavily as a way to help with the Senate bill that allows people to choose where they want to go to school. And this district was really facing a little bit of a mass exodus, and they were doing what they could to tell their story to promote their school. And the way it was explained is you want to think about when somebody walks into your parking lot or walks into your lobby, does what they see reflect what's important to you? And I was in a building that was recently remodeled and then COVID hit, right? COVID hit when we were remodeled. And so we hadn't done a lot to personalize our space yet. It was a beautiful space, but wasn't really personalized. So we started just by taking pictures of our students with an iPhone, nothing fancy, and just printing pictures at Walmart and framing them on the walls. But then we would ask our students, what do you love about our school? And type that underneath their pictures so that it looks like you're at a museum or something. And it's completely transformed our school, and we get a lot of compliments on it. We have, like, when prospective parents are in the building, they're reading to their kids, oh, look what this kid likes about this school. It's going to be amazing. You're really going to love it here. So I think that idea, somebody had posted having kids' pictures in the halls. We also have some where they're just working and stuff, and we're not interviewing the kids. And we have an alumni featured, there are our big second graders that have moved on to the next school are our alumni. So talking about what they loved here. And then we have some parents that have done the same thing and talking about and we have that in our waiting area for our parents, so that there's parents that have been interviewed about what they love about our school. And that was pretty easy and pretty powerful. Any other comments or questions on this topic before we move to the next item?
Looks like we do have the flyer and shared that in the chat. So thank you for your willingness to share on that. And Suzanne, do you want me to advance slides for the next portion, or are you going to do your own slides?
It would be great if you could do that. I'm not
absolutely.
As comfortable in Teams. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So we also had a request from a member to do some have something about supporting social emotional learning and behavior with younger children. So because I'm in a primary, I had some information here that I could share. And again, I think that a lot of these strategies would be appropriate for all ages. So please stop me if you have questions, or we can discuss this at the end. I would love to hear also what's going on in your spaces and really take advantage of the brain power of those of us in this meeting. I'm just trying to get the conversation started here. So I'm going to tell a little bit about what we're going to be discussing. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this journey that we went on when we became a school. We're going to talk through some national, state, and local data. We're going to talk a little bit about trauma, how we've changed some mindsets here, some data systems that we use at my school, how it's helped us, and then an opportunity for questions and feedback if things don't come up before then. So this map is a little bit old because I started this journey before COVID, but if you don't already know, Kentucky has the highest percentage of children experiencing at least 2 ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences before the age of 5 in the country. And this is not, this is not one of those things you want to be on the top for, right? This is not the good rating. And this image comes from a resource called the Opportunity Atlas, and you can Google the Opportunity Atlas, and it has a lot of maps and features that you can even drill down and look a little more locally. So we're going to look at an example of that here in a second. So this is a map of my community, and it's an incarceration map that was pulled from the Opportunity Atlas, and it will let you zoom in pretty small and look at neighborhoods. Danville's not very big, and these are some neighborhoods within Danville. What had happened, the reason that some of this conversation had started was myself and an assistant principal at our intermediate school were asked to speak to a church group, and they wanted to know more about, they said, we want to know about how poverty, trauma, and drug use are impacting our kids in our schools. And they said, could you put something together and talk to us about it? And this is when we started looking for the data. We had the ACEs map, but we really wanted to know, what does it look like in our community to really educate people locally? And both this assistant principal and myself live in this bright red area, which is over 8% of people in my neighborhood are or have been incarcerated. So that really hit home in talking with people that think, well, this isn't in our town. And so the rates, that's the highest that you can get on these maps, is that bright red. So that was part. So I would encourage you to also start looking at your local data. We put together some tables, and I could share some more of this if you're interested, but it had in several areas, it would have our city data, and because we're within a county and we're an independent, included the county data, state data, and national data for anything that we had. So this was a map that is really powerful. And there you can look up other things on this Opportunity Atlas as well. Okay. So some national things that we'd found was that Kentucky has the highest percentage of jailed parents in the country, and the highest percentage of children living with relatives in the United States, which makes Anne's resource and her idea really relevant and important for us. Female incarceration is double the national average and second in the country, and over 70% of jailed women are mothers. So we could not find the data for Kentucky on how many students have an incarcerated, how many children have an incarcerated parent, but nationally it's 1 in 28 that currently have an incarcerated parent, and 1 in 7 that have had a parent incarcerated. So when you consider that my community has very high rates of incarceration and Kentucky has very high rates of incarceration, then those numbers would be even higher here. So we started asking all these questions. Go ahead, Stacy, that's fine. We started asking a lot of questions, and some of that came from asking our students to tell us a little bit more about what they were dealing with. So when the students are old enough, so this example came from the intermediate school. The counselors had done some lessons around, they used the language of clay problems and rock problems, that clay problems are ones that you can kind of deal with and solve, and they're malleable, and rock problems are ones that never go away and that you just have to carry and deal with. And we think about all the things that we carry in our invisible backpack, they're like rocks. And so the more rocks you have in your backpack, these things just get added and they're cumulative. Often those are those adverse childhood experiences. Some of those don't result in trauma, but some they can. And so these are things that can be adding to our invisible backpack. So a really good book, if you're looking for a practical resource, this is, I think, really practical and applicable for teachers, is this book called I Wish My Teacher Knew. This is written by a second grade teacher in Colorado. And she started by asking her class the question of like, what is something you wish I knew, and gave them Post-it notes. And what happened was they started writing things like what we see on the screen. My dad's on jail for drugs. He did meth, coke, weed, and he was always passed out. So this came from one of our students in our district. And so, you know, that was really, really hard for us to begin seeing. And just like this author, Kyle Schwartz, was saying, is once you learn these things, we have to learn how to help and how to deal with that. And we're often not trained, which then resulted in some, of course, some trauma training. Stacey, can you go to the next slide? So part of how we've been helping and changing mindsets is really another good resource that I would highly recommend is What Happened to You book. It's a Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing. It's written by Dr. Bruce Perry, who's really the expert in trauma, and co-authored by Oprah Winfrey. And it really reads like a conversation. You can get the audiobook and listen to it. The hardback is, I think it's maybe $12 on Amazon. So we've actually used Title IV money, and next year our entire school is doing this book as a book study together to dig in more than we already have in this book. And one of the things that this book really does is it changes the thinking of what's wrong with you to what happened to you or what didn't happen for you, and really thinking about the trauma that people have experienced and our students have experienced, and many times our staff. When we started doing this work, we've learned that we have a lot of staff who've experienced trauma, and you know what has happened or hasn't happened for them that should have. All right, Stacey. So, okay, one of the ways that we change mindsets, and this looks like it's going off the screen a little bit, at least on my screen. That's okay. So this, when we first became a school, it was a shift for our, a lot of people to have a lot of little people in the building at the same time, or little kids on the bus. And, you know, it's kind of hard to control little kids, especially kids that are learning how to do school, and maybe kids that have some post-traumatic stress. And this, one of the activities that we did was our kids were getting written up on the bus all the time. You know, like, I don't know what to do with this kid. They get on the bus and they act crazy, or they, you know, and we decided to reframe that, and we started hosting bus driver appreciation breakfasts. And when we had our first bus driver appreciation breakfast, we wrote scenarios like this for the kids that ride our buses. This is a real story of one of our students that is now at the intermediate school. He was really struggling on the bus. And there were lots of other stories like this. We wrote this story for the student, but from that mindset of what the student had experiences that we knew about. And we put these strips of paper on the tables and let the bus drivers read them. And we gave them, like, here are some kids on your bus. And we just gave them a pile of these stories. And they're like, holy cow, I have 10 kids from your school that ride my bus, and there's 10 slips of paper. How can all of these kids already have experienced these things? And it really changed their mindsets of they're often maybe the first happy face or the last happy face that they see each day. And now when we have issues on the bus, they're like, how can I help? I noticed this kid's really struggling, or they're texting me and saying, I noticed a different car today and just want to let you know the police were at the house when I got there. And it's really transformed some mindsets. We've done some similar things with our instructional assistants, classified staff, and really help to change some of the thinking about realizing what we know our kids are carrying with them. These were some stories. This year we have a new counselor. I might have to read some of what these are, because these kids are using phonetic spelling for sure. But these are kids that are, our counselor has really encouraged students, if they can't talk about their problems, that they can write things and give them to adults in the building. So the one on the left was, he hit me with a piece of glass and it hit me in the back, help. Speaking about a mom's boyfriend. Then The one on the right, it's been very hard for my dad. He does not have a home, so he has to sleep in someone's home. It's very small. So ever since my dad left my mom, it wasn't fun. My brother and sister tried to cheer me up. My dad left me and my brother and sister in 2022 when I was in kindergarten. Next slide. So one of the resources that's in the What Happened to You book, this is one of my favorite things that's in the book, and it is not in the audiobook, so it's worth purchasing the print book even if you listen to the audiobook. There's some charts and visuals that are helpful. This is especially helpful to me because it looks at the different states of mind that we're in, and we always want to have our students in the calm state, which is where you can really reflect and think. If students are not in that calm state, you're not going to get the same instruction or learning. Excuse me. And what I find most powerful about this is the functional IQ row at the bottom. So when you think about anyone who's in one of these different states, it lowers their IQ. So it's really important to do what we can to keep students and to get students back to calm if they're not there, and taking the time to invest in their mental health and their social emotional learning to get them back and regulated. So when we see students that are in that flight, fight, or freeze, you know what those behaviors look like, and we're not going to be in that good learning space there. So this is something that we created as a school, and we did this in conjunction with our mental health professionals that we collaborate with. We're really fortunate. I'm sure most of you or all of you have a school counselor. So we've got a school counselor, but we also have a district wellness counselor who's a licensed clinical therapist, and we also have a couple of licensed clinical therapists that we contract with that serve students that hit at that top level of mental health need. So they go through a referral process. If we're not able to meet their needs with our school counselor, then we can refer them to one of the licensed clinical therapists. At a certain point, if we're not reaching what we need to with coping skills and therapy, we also can, we contract with a child psychiatrist who can be a prescriber for our students. So we have this great framework and resource of mental health providers. And we also have a pediatrician's office that rounds at all of our schools and can help us with some mental health things that are on a lower level that they're willing to work with. So we worked with a list of like what are average childhood experiences. We also kind of changed it up a little bit and put some things on here as a school in conjunction with those school wellness counselors and therapists about things that we felt we should be tracking. And these data sheets are kept for every classroom. And part of how we get this data is when our students enroll in preschool, there is a social and developmental history that parents have to complete as part of the public preschool process. So anytime that we get a student after that, whether it's at kindergarten or even in first grade, we have the parents fill that out as a new parent so that we can get that information to collect some things to put on our ACEs document and to have some background information about what's happened prior to joining our school. We were really surprised how much people tell us. Our counselor also has a conversation with parents when they enroll to help us with that. So whenever we learn more about a situation or students, we add them also to the ACEs document. And then our counselors and teachers can use this information to see that, for example, that in this class, there's a student who has 7 ACEs, and making sure that this student, if they don't have any outward behaviors, that we're making sure that they're okay, because they could be internalizing a lot of this these adverse childhood experiences that they've had. Looking for trends as a school and things that we can do to help with families or classes through lessons with our counselor or supports for families when we see trends. And then this is another tool that we've adapted from the DESA assessment. And this is something that the teachers do 3 times a year. It's based on their observations, and they choose how often they see these behaviors from students. So it's called a strengths assessment. It's asset phrased. And this is another place where we can look to see if there's anyone that we might need to do some preventative instruction with, or to put in any kind of social groups, or have our behavior specialist or our counselor help with any instruction with them. We also have, this year we started doing something a little different with our art teacher. She is, there's a little window of time in her day where she teaches off campus at another site and then teaches here, and there's a little window in the middle. So we've, this year, she's really been interested in art therapy, and she's been getting art therapy training and is doing art therapy with some students as another way to have preventative care and some counseling services. So with all of the data and all of these resources, it really has helped us to build relationships, which is the number one thing you learn with trauma-informed care, is the way to reverse those adverse childhood experiences, which actually impact your brain and your wiring, is to then build positive relationships with students. It helps us to find the trends. It can help us to customize support. It helps us to know more about the kids, what may be possible triggers, or what to understand where they've been. And I was just wondering to open this up for if there's any questions from you all, or ideas that you have, that things that have worked that you think would be helpful in this conversation for other principals. All right. So I think the next item on our agenda, if there's not anything with this, is Stacy's going to take over and talk about the PCEL implementation supports.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. So PCEL, super important to principals. Thinking about implementation of PCEL, it's kind of the time of the year. We're coming to a close, and I'm sure a lot of you have already been engaged with conversations as you're closing the certified evaluation plan this year, conversations with your supervisor, probably doing some personal reflection, all relative to your standards, which are the professional standards for educational leaders. And so on the P3 webpage, we do have a variety of different resources to help support implementation. But one tool that we are especially proud of is the Kentucky PCEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool. And so that's been available for use for the last 2 to 3 years or so. And as time has elapsed and we've gotten information from the field, we are updating that tool on an annual basis. And so we are very excited to share with you all a link to the updated tool. We're going to do that in just a moment, but I want to give you a little bit of context about what you're going to see. So with this newly updated tool, there is a focus on standards 3, 5, and 8. And The old tool, or I will say version 1, let's call it version 1. Version 1 did not have possible examples by element, but this updated version for standards 3, 5, and 8, they have possible examples for each individual element of those 3 standards. So we're really excited to share that with you. Now, key things to take note of when you start to examine the tool. We have accomplished possible examples by element. So keep in mind that accomplished is the goal. That's our level of effective practice. And so we have accomplished possible examples by element. And as you start to examine those, you're going to notice some new things that have been added. We're especially excited to have embedded hyperlinks in most, if not all, of the accomplished possible examples for standards 3, 5, and 8. And so just to give you a little bit of background as to the decision-making process as to why we did this, we did have a group of variety of stakeholders, including sitting principals, assistant principals, superintendents, members of the co-op, members of higher ed, all came together and worked on the development of these possible examples. And so they felt like it would be especially helpful for principals who we know who are extremely busy to have easy access to vetted resources. And so these vetted resources align to the intent of the standard. And also, these embedded hyperlinks are promoting best practice. So, thinking about what it would look like at that accomplished level, we have some things to examine. And we want them to spark thinking, recognizing that the possible examples that are embedded in the tool are not the only way that this particular practice could look like in action, but at least it gives you an opportunity to be thinking about what it might look like. So, as we make our way, I do want to emphasize, and I can't say it enough, I've got it in bold, highlighted text here, that when you start examining the tool and you look at these possible examples, they are only possibilities. This tool is not even something you have to use. It's only there to support schools and districts and principals and supervisors if they are interested in using it. So um, it's only serving as a possibility of what it might look like. And there are definitely numerous other ways that the standard's intent could be demonstrated. And we would encourage districts and principals to have conversations about what that might look like. So if you notice that last bullet, we want this tool to be used as a springboard for internal discussions regarding district expectations for principals. So it would make perfect sense if there are some heavy district initiatives that are going on. You would want to be thinking about possible examples through the lens of that initiative work. So these are not the only way. They're only intended to promote thinking around those day-to-day aspects of the school leader's work. So just want to set that up before we start looking at them. And what we're going to do first, before I turn you loose and start to let you look at the tool, I want to just share with you some of the newly revised examples. And so you'll notice here that the example projected is connected to Standard 5, and it is an example for Element A. So we've got that strong element connection. And within the element, it says, builds and maintains a safe, caring, and healthy school environment that meets the academic, social, emotional, and physical needs of each student. So the proposed possible example that you'll find there in the tool is provided. So I'm going to give you a moment to read it. I'm not going to read it to you, but I want you to just read the possible example that's on the screen. And then I'm going to point out some things to you. Okay, so as you examine this particular possible example and you look back to the element, you'll notice within this element there is a lot embedded. At the end of the statement here, it talks about meeting the academic, social, emotional, and physical needs of each student. Now, as you examine this possible example, you'll notice that this is all about the physical supports to ensure essential physical supports are provided. And as you start looking through the tool, you'll find other examples for element A, and those other examples are going to connect to showcasing the academic needs. You'll find an example that showcases the social and those emotional needs. But as you look at this one, right off the bat, you'll see that embedded link. And so there's an embedded link to the Frisk Handbook. And we even give credit to where that is connected, Kentucky Division of Family Resource and Youth Service Centers. But then also, as you look at this possible example, you're going to see a lot of connections to those day-to-day work of the school. So you've got the connection to the principal handbook, the principal partnering with the Frisk director. Kind of sounds like what Ann was talking about earlier. She's kind of showcasing her work and connecting to this particular element. Um, You've got a referral process in place, and it's documented in Infinite Campus, something that we have to use daily. We've got a review of impact being conducted and presented to the Site-Based Decision-Making Council, something that we are constantly doing, and then we're planning for those future supports. So certainly, as you just visually look at this, these examples that are going to be in the updated version, a lot lengthier than what we had in version 1, but loads and loads of supports hopefully are embedded in there that's going to make implementation of PCEL a little easier for principals. Now, as you advance, you can see we have 2 other examples, but we're not going to look at those as tightly, but they are available for you in the slide deck because we've only got about 20 minutes of time left, and I want to give you an opportunity to take some time to look at the updated tool. And so we are going to try to do a breakout room, and when we're in the breakout room, I want you to look at whatever standard that you are assigned to work on, and we'll let you know that in just a moment. But I want you to look at the embedded possible examples structurally. So as you look at it, number one, I want to ask you, if you don't mind, to click that hyperlink and make sure that the hyperlink is working correctly. It takes you to the correct page. As you read the text, make sure that you don't see any like spelling errors, for instance, or any omissions. Maybe there's a typo and there's a word left out. We'd love for you to look at it through that lens of structurally, does it meet expectation? Is it clear? Is there anything that maybe needs to be revised a bit before we release this publicly? So we're going to take about 5 minutes for you to look at your assigned standard. And I'm going to stop sharing here for just a moment. And in the chat, I'm going to ask Allison, if you don't mind, to go ahead and drop the link to the tool. And whenever you click on the link at the bottom, you're going to see the tool, and you're going to see the tabs for each of the 10 standards. I want you to look for Standard 3, Standard 5, and Standard 8, and you're going to visually see that the tabs at the bottom look a little different as compared to the other standards. Let's just make sure that we can get that open. But hopefully you were able to start the process of reviewing the assigned standard. Any specific feedback that anyone wants to share, large group? Okay.
Stacy, we
Yes.
think we were element 8, and
Yes.
on element B, in the green boxes, there were some links that worked if you hovered over them, but you kind of missed them because they don't have that blue hyperlink appearance to them.
Okay.
But the links are there if you hover over them. We discovered that.
That's great. Great feedback. So we need to do something to make sure that
That's
that's
what
more
we need.
visible.
Mhm.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Well, you've got the link. So if you have a little more time that you want to devote to looking at it, maybe in the next day or two, feel free to do that. And you could shoot me a direct email with any kind of feedback or suggestions or anything that we need to polish before we do our mass release of this. And so one thing that I wanted to just quickly kind of pick your all's brains about is what is the best method? What's the best strategy? What's the best audience to try to target to let folks know that we have this ready and that it is available for use? How should we communicate it?
Stacey, I was wondering, and I think this might have been something you and I talked about maybe on just the two of us in one of the planning meetings, but if there's a way to have using the P3 listserv to communicate out things from these meetings that are practical to people. And like to say after a meeting, like if you want to learn more about these P-cell resource and how to use that, like click on this part of the recording if you want to listen, but then here's the document, and maybe make it a way to, I don't know. I think utilizing that P3 newsletter, the listserv, I would imagine there's a lot of people on it.
Yeah, we do have a large mailing list. And so providing a summary of the PrAC meeting with the different agenda items and maybe connected resources if they want to learn. Yeah, I think so. It's a great suggestion.
Could you attach that to a larger email? Like, you know how different departments and KDE sends out like a Monday message. Could you kind of include that? Because I like that, but if you're not in P3, you're not going to hear about it. And so I've come away from some of these meetings and shared with some of my McCracken principals that we weren't aware of some of the, like the calendar that P3 has is awesome, but we just weren't aware of it. So maybe send it out to everybody, but if you're interested in learning more, join P3 because there are still some others that aren't involved.
Yeah. Great suggestion.
Yeah, one that I thought of with, there's obviously a large number of principals, but fewer superintendents. So superintendents could reach out to all of their principals in their districts. I don't know if there's information that y'all send directly to superintendents just for them to share the resource with the principals in their district, because sometimes our superintendent's emails can get our attention a little better than a general email or the KASA or the P3 or KDE, some of those kind of get bogged down at times. So that was a method that I was thinking of.
Yeah, great suggestion. Perfect. Thank you all. Okay, so I've got one more request. In thinking about where we're going next, so you had a chance to look at what's been done with these updated possible examples by element now for standards 3, 5, and 8. We are going to work on another standard for this school year and kind of work the next few months on it. And then the next school year, we're going to pick another standard. So I'd just love in the chat if you could provide your suggestion for which two standards that you would love to see these updated possible examples by elements be created for. And just a little heads up as you're doing this, think about what would help you as a professional, because as members of PrAC, part of the responsibility for serving on this statewide group is giving back to the professional community. And so we are going to actually split up our PrAC members into two groups. And so half of you are going to do the standard that we are going to work on for this year. And then the next year, we're going to ask the remaining members to work on that work group. So, as you're thinking about which two standards that you'd like to see these updated possible examples for, think about, which one would you be interested in and maybe doing a deep dive and working around, because we are going to ask you to commit to be part of that work group. And you can just pop that in the chat. And as you're doing that and thinking about it, just for, we've got a few minutes here, I do want to turn it to item 8 on the agenda. And that is, we did have those legislative updates with Dr. Glass to start off the meeting, but anything else that you want to connect to those legislative updates that would be impacting school principals, Dr. Darnell, or EPSB updates?
Well, first off, I just want to lead with my gratitude for each and every one of you all. The people in this state are quite amazing, and I would put our educator workforce against any other state out there. So just thank you for the positions that you hold. Also, the P3 team is working hard to just try to be some semblance of support. It is not a lot, we know, but the commitment is huge. So please, we are here in any capacity that may be of support to you, i.e. looking at the PSEL work here, hopefully will help you and assist. So that's what we want to know. Is it working or isn't it working? And how else could we make it better for you? I know Dr. Glass, he just brought a wealth of smiles this morning with his report and talked at length about the things happening in the General Assembly. So I am not going to jump back into that. We shall see. This is a big week, though, because the veto period starts Friday. And that's a pretty, that's why everything's spinning rather quickly now. So we shall see. But just also want to reiterate that if there's a scenario, a situation, an individual that you would like to receive assistance on, I know that we're in times where we have to try to be creative. We have to face potential solutions that we, hadn't thought of before. And so if this involves individuals that need certification, or you're wondering about certification, please contact EPSB or contact me, and we will make sure that we at least do our due diligence in trying to help you. I promise you that EPSB is not trying to be the land of no, and I get it. Trust me, I know. And the statutes, we can't mess with statute. We have the regulations, and sometimes waivers apply. So there are scenarios that we can help walk you through, and we'll do our best to do that because I know that unfortunately the times are getting a bit drastic in certain situations. So we just want to make sure we're being a good partner. And I just want to put that out there and let you know that is never imposition and always available to each and every one of you. And I just want to say thanks to P3 and Keith, we'll get that Cessna plan going and we'll put that banner with all those resources and we'll do like the beach flybys across the state there. So hope you're not afraid of heights, buddy.
No, I'd say he's up for it. All right, Suzanne, how about we turn over to you? Last item on the agenda.
Yes, our last item on the agenda is adjournment. So we would need a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Jared. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Stacy, do you know who that was? Because I didn't get to see. Do you need that?
Was it Kevin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Making sure you got what you needed. And then an approval in the chat box, and we will see you all in June at our next meeting, June 13th. And I believe we'll probably be following up with feedback And we'll be looking to you all for some ideas closer to the time for our next agenda. So thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yeah.